We do record these programs and want to eventually make them available for use here, but also have copies that can be lended and listened to. If you miss a program, you can catch up on it. We're also redoing the audio tapes that we did for many, many years. We have about 30 years worth of recordings, and Roger Nichols is helping us with that project. He records them from the cassette tape onto CDs, and we're gradually building up that collection. So that program goes on and on. I do want to talk about the coming weeks. The last week, Barbara Telfer will be talking about the 100th anniversary of the old Carnegie Library building, now the Art Center, but also the public library, which came into existence 100 years ago. That's 2 weeks from now, and we'll be at the regular 1:30 time. Next week, because of the Philip Clint Memorial Service, we asked our speaker to start at 11 o'clock in the morning, so you might want to make a note of that. B.B. Gaston is what the great-grand niece of Gifford Pinchot, has written a very interesting book about her grandmother, who was the niece of Gifford Pinchot, and has done a lot of research in the Gifford Pinchot collection at the Library of Congress, which is the largest single collection in that library. In fact, she's back there right now and comes back, splits her time between the Dalles and Washington, D.C. and other places.
Who's Gifford Pinchot?
Oh. Who's Gifford Pinchot?
I know. I bet there's at least one person in this room that doesn't.
Oh. Well, you've heard of the National Forest named after him. First director of the National Forest. And really the person, along with Teddy Roosevelt, who got that whole program going way back turn of the last century. So that should be an interesting program. She's published some family materials and knows things from letters that are not in her current book, but probably will be in an eventual book, things that Gifford wrote in relation to the Forest Service people in the very early days. So it should be an interesting program, but we are going at 11 o'clock next week instead of 1:30, just for the 1 week. Well, we've been looking forward to this program for a long time. Marilyn not only has been doing a lot of research in the accumulated documents and all kinds of things that we collect here in the building, about the original courthouse, but she's been part of that history, very much a part of that history herself, through much of the building's latest incarnation. 9 lives, and she's going to talk about the various lives. And I did want to just make a special mention. We have all these old pictures of the first judges. Well, we have the last judge of Wasco County with us today. We no longer have a county judge, but Dan, we still call you Your Honor as a commissioner.
You may.
What's his name?
So I do want to say Marilyn's family has been very helpful getting resources back and forth. Sandy's made some trips. I've carried a few boxes over to Marilyn's place, and she's put a lot of good things together, and we're looking forward to this program. I'm going to switch this off, Marilyn, and turn on the one in your pocket. And if we have to turn up volume or tweak anything here, we'll do that, but I think we're in pretty good shape. So let's have a hand for Marilyn here.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here and to see the changes that have come about. The last time I was upstairs, there was a monstrous big black column that was used for projecting pictures. It's It's so much nicer when they're all tidied up and on the square. So it's a real pleasure. Now, probably you'll hear things that you already know. In trying to get this pulled together, all these wonderful books they brought to me and the resources, there was too much stuff. So I wrote out a speech and I looked at it. Won't go in 40 minutes, so I started to delete. If it seems choppy, it's because I didn't delete as smoothly as I wanted. I trust that you know that Wasco County, way back when it was made, or named, was the largest county ever created in the United States of America. It was 130,000 square miles. The boundaries were the crest of the Cascades on the west, and it went to the Great Divide of the Rockies. That included most of Idaho, all the southern part of it, parts of Montana, Wyoming, a little bit of Yellowstone was in it. This is a map. The Dalles was named the county seat. Now, why do you suppose? It isn't because it was centrally located. It isn't because it was really convenient to get to. It's the only town on that map in 130,000 square miles. We were a natural. The pioneers, as they came, kind of gathered here because it was a place they had to decide how they were going to get onto the Willamette Valley. They all had the Willamette Valley, most of them had the Willamette Valley clearly in their mind that they wanted to reach. So there were people here, a few, estimated from 300 to 500 people were permanent residents. But there were many, many more people, transients going through. Some of them were good citizens, some of them were ruffians, some of them were really problem people. There was a saloon on every corner, we're told. There were many brawls, lots of shootings. There was no courtroom. There was no jail. Court proceedings were held in designated saloons. The judge would go down the street if he had a case coming up and he'd say, "Charlie, I want to have court here in the morning. Be open at a certain hour." If they had to lock somebody up, then they were dangerous. They had no place to put them. So they sent them up to the courthouse. And if the courthouse could take them, they did. Otherwise, they had to go west and get way down almost the Willamette Valley. For this, they paid the per diem. They also were renting space for their county business and the things that counties required. And the per diem, and it was too much money going up. The commissioners met and agreed to put up $2,500. And for that, they planned to have a building that would have a courtroom and a meeting room. It was a dual function. They would have sheriff's office and the clerk's office. And that's downstairs, the sheriff and the clerk. And then the back part were the jail cells. So the building was constructed from lumber brought in from Mosier and or floated up the Columbia from Cascade Locks. Now, the construction of the building required very long cupophores, and I imagine that those are the ones that were floated from Cascade Locks. It was a balloon-style architecture with a lath and plaster finish. It was completed in 1859 by J.C. Wallace. And he had spent the $2,500. He called the commissioners to look at the building and accept it. They said, "What? You have to finish painting it. You have to put locks on the cells. You have to put a doorknob in." And he pled his poverty case. They ended up paying for the extras was a little less than $500 to get the place finished. It had been built on the northeast corner of Court Street and at 3rd. It was facing east. The front of it was right up against the wooden sidewalk. Soon a roof was extended from the building out over the sidewalk, which made it look like a porch. But I think it was easier to get the prisoners in if they had a little protection from the weather. The first floor, I've said, was the sheriff's office and the clerk. And then this back part were the jail cells. The upstairs was used for community meetings as well as for court. The Congregational Church, led by Mr. Teddy, held its first services in the courtroom right here. Early on, the building harbored additional inhabitants brought in by the prisoners. Vice, these, bed bugs forced the prim church ladies to lift their skirts off the floor. The lumber and the flooring dried. There were probably no kills at that time, and they used what they could get. And the cracks, they were caulked with a kind of, looks like plaster here and there. And this, I'm sure, is what was there early on. But the lumber, in shrinking, leading to cracks, let the sound as well as the little vermin come through. When the congregation would sing, the prisoners would sing along with them, but not always the same words. The prisoners calculated to annoy the devout group upstairs. The same spaces in the floor brought inappropriate amens from the lower level. The cracks were later filled with what appears to be plaster, but it didn't stop the sound. After 21 years, it fell into disfavor. It was too small. The grand jury decided again, as it had several times before. In 1880, they announced that the courthouse had to be replaced. It was decrepit and worn out. So I will read out a quote of the Times Mountaineer, November 30th, 1880. And this kind of starts in the middle, but they're referring to the escape of the prisoners. The number of prisoners which have broken out of the old wooden case, which has served the purpose of jail for over 20 years, has fully verified the fact of the escapes. Some of these prisoners have broken out through the boarded wall by kicking, while others have wrenched boards off with nothing but a stove leg. The greatest vigilance of the sheriff awaits nothing, while the building remains in such an unsafe condition, and it's a waste of money to attempt to repair it, for the timbers are old and rotten. Our sheriff is not responsible for the house the county furnishes him in which to cage his birds. He is only required to exercise reasonable care, and no officers were ever more watchful than Sheriffs Crossan and Stores, during whose term of office the escapes have been made. And there's a gap, and it concludes. Perhaps there is not a county in the state that has such a rickety old building for courtroom, sheriff's office, and jail as Wasco. And there are but few counties that surpass it in wealth and population. Thinking about this, I speculate from the age of the building, 1859, it was probably the first jail that was built that did not have upkeep in the county budget and didn't have maintenance and people to look after it. It is ever us. There are more jails built with nobody to run them. So a building was abandoned as the courthouse, and the new courthouse was constructed. The date I have is 1882, but in looking at John Lundell's paper on this, it took a while to acquire the property they needed and the bidding and all this. So it could be anything from 1882 or 1881 to 1883 could be the date on that second courthouse. But it was a handsome brick building. It was constructed on the corner of 3rd and Union with ample room for the county to grow. It had secure jail cells in the basement where prisoners could be lodged. It was used until 1914 when it became too small. Well, the original courthouse was still acceptable for use as the Dallas City Hall. I would really like to know how they rid that building of those little apartments to make it fit to work in. It served for 27 years, and once again, it was too small to hold the workload. It was then moved diagonally across the street so the city could continue to use it while they constructed a new city hall. Obviously, it had been abandoned twice as a suitable building. It was used up. It was slated for demolition. But Matt Shorn, the local blacksmith, looked it over. He could see a future in it. And in 1911, he bought it and moved it 3 blocks down 3rd Street to a lot near his blacksmith shop. It became a rooming house with an extension on the back, windows cut into the side walls, a porch and false front added to the street side with a second floor balcony over the porch. An interior staircase was added to the right of the small door at the front of the building so that the residents could get upstairs. The sturdy little courthouse served its longest tenure, 50 years, as a rooming house. Many visitors to the original courthouse have dropped in to visit and look at the building now. One lady took piano lessons, talking about it, and the piano was right over there. She pointed to the inside wall downstairs. Another lived here as a child in the upstairs part, and it does get hot in the Dalles, you all know. So they slept on the outside porch, the upper level. And she said, it was a little better. There was an occasional breeze. The mosquitoes were terrible. Someone else remembered a time that the stove blew up in the kitchen. So there were lots of stories. If they could be tracked down, that could be a dissertation of this home. So this went on until 1961. Grady's grocery store across the street needed more parking and purchased the lot that the rooming house was on. So May 9, 1961, the Chronicle announced demolition of the courthouse to make way for a parking lot for Grady's grocery. It was delayed enough for history-oriented people to arrange to move it at night with permission from the State Highway down 3rd Street and across the U.S. Highway 30 bridge on West 2nd to the Lewis and Clark Monument site, west of Millbridge, where it was set up on blocks until permanent location could be found. And till permanent location could be found should be in quotes, because it's a recurring phrase. In a letter to the Chronicle, written in 1973, which was 12 years after that, Lois Nichols relates more details for this period. When the Brady lot was purchased, the building on it was donated to the Museum Commission, and that was chaired by Don Williams. Colonel Nichols conferred with Thomas Vaughn, the chairman of the Oregon Historical Museum, for his opinion about whether the building should be saved. Mr. Vaughn sent people to evaluate the structure, and they felt that it was indeed historically worthy of and very significant. County Judge Jim Hunt assured Nichols that the county would help pay for the moving. Preparation of the move required the front and the rear additions to be torn down. Townspeople helped to repair it. The city couldn't give a building permit because it was located on state property. Colonel Nichols went to Salem and got it transferred to Dallas City, Wasco County. During the next few years, siding and heavy wire were added to try to protect and preserve the building, but vandalism was rampant, and it became a hazardous, ugly sight. At this point, I would like to apologize for my voice. I have a plugged up ear, and I sound like to me, like I'm talking out of a barrel. I hope it's not. I'm too unpleasant. It remained there on the blocks as a refuge for transients until July 2nd, 1972, when a majority of the city council voted to have the building raised. A group of citizens then started an injunction proceeding to halt this action. At the time that the legal action was taken, a bulldozer was ready to knock down the tall frame building. The group was quietly seeking other opportunities, but they hadn't materialized. The Chronicle reported, and this is a quote, "At the last meeting, the council made clear that there are no objections to prevent preservation of the building. The earlier decision to demolish was based on the belief it is dangerous at present, it being open to entry by children and others." Al Warnmark is credited with being present with others on location to stop the bulldozers that came to demolish the building. The more I read about this group of people, I could see, and most of them I knew, but I could see they were strong individuals, had their own picture of what should happen. But through it all, Al Warnmark seemed to be at the heart of the thing. He was every man that was looking to preserve history, do it well, and have it be something other people could enjoy. In April of '73, the original Courthouse Preservation Committee was formed at a public hearing. Officers were Colonel Lewis Nichols, President, Al Warnmark, Vice President, Christine Key, Secretary, and Roman Bertrand, Treasurer. July 1st, '73, the Chronicle reported there was a measure before the state legislature to allow the original courthouse to be relocated on the site back of the Pioneer Cemetery near Cirrhosis Park. Now, back to me would be south. Knowing the streets of the Dalles, the height of this courthouse, that would be a monumental move to get it up there. But if that was not passed, the city moved to raise the building within 24 hours. Dissolution of the temporary restraining order issued by Judge John Gelders was ordered. On August 8th, the city council voted a 60-day extension for removal of the courthouse from the Lewis and Clark site to a location near the Shamrock Club. If it is not gone, it will be raised the 61st day. On October 18th, the Oregonian reported that the original courthouse is on the move again, but only about 100 yards west to private property adjacent to the Shamrock Club. The city had plans for the LNC site. So the courthouse will stay at the new location until a final resting place. However, the Chronicle reported the actual move as on April 26th in 1974, when Jim Mallett was in charge of the move with help from the Preservation Committee and lineman for VP and L of Pacific Northwest Bell. The committee had found 2 other possible locations. They also invited authorities on historic buildings to look at the courthouse to be sure that it was really worth saving. Paul Hartwig, historical programs coordinator, wrote to them, "I am very impressed with the patience, determination, and drive of the community." Some of the community, he might have said. "Allow me to stress to you the importance of the Wasco County Courthouse to all Oregonians." A letter from David C. Talbot, State Park Superintendent, and Elizabeth Walton, Park Historian, states, "The committee rated the courthouse high in areas of rarity, interpretive potential, and date of construction. As far as is known, the building is the oldest extant courthouse in Oregon, the only one remaining from the territorial period." That kind of put it in a class by itself. There were other opinions. The Oregonian quoted Mrs. Bird Keith, Christine Keith, in an article submitted by George Lindsay. The historical significance of the structure makes it worth saving, even if its aesthetic appeal might not. It's painfully plain, homely in its stark straight lines. It has no handsome spires, no stained glass windows, no mellowed paneling, but with a little tender light care, and in the proper setting, it could be a tourist attraction, and possibly even charming. Gene Crowder also weighed in another article by George Lindsay. "An elderly, somewhat dowdy building, the original Wasco County Courthouse, found a new home Monday. The significance of this building lies in its uniqueness as the seat of government of the largest county ever formed in the United States, 130,000 square miles. In January of 1974, the original courthouse was selected by the American Revolution Bicentennial Committee of Oregonians as the meeting house site of Oregon. But on May 10th, Mr. Keith was informed that the building had too many changes to the original to qualify for selection as the meeting house of Oregon. I mention this to demonstrate the comprehensive search that was used to find credentials and recognition for the historic little building. A new name surfaced. At the Landmarks Commission meeting on April 29, 1975, Commissioner Gary Hummel brought up the possibility of locating the original courthouse on the lot between the Chamber of Commerce and Mill Creek on West 2nd Street. He pointed out that it would complement the other historic buildings in the area and perhaps could assist the chamber at distribution of information to tourists. It could be the center of the walking tour of the historic West Dallas. I think his suggestion hit fertile ground. On May 19th, 1975, the Chamber of Commerce granted permission for the original courthouse to be placed on the lot west of their building. On June 10th, 1975, Colonel Nichols wrote to the City Council for permission to put the courthouse on the Chamber Park site. In August, a letter arrived from the Oregon State Highway Division commending the committee for the location and for plans to hire a restoration architect. It was signed by Paul Huntley, Historical Programs Coordinator. The committee had continued to work quietly, so when they found the correct location, they were ready for a qualified and excellent restoration architect named Al Staley. Mr. Staley had evaluated the building and was ready to help outline the footprint of the foundation. His preliminary report indicated that the basic timbers in the structure were sound, and the balloon construction had helped preserve the integrity of the building during its several moves around town. Those old rotten timbers that were condemned by the grand jury in 1880 had lasted 92 more years. Mr. Staley carefully instructed workers to save anything that might be a part of the original construction. And he had quite a selection, layers of wallpaper, some of those from the rooming house days. He had paint samples and little bits of wood that he identified as probably from the original structure. Al Thornmark called a meeting to encourage volunteers to sign up to help with the restoration. Of course, each committee person had enthusiasm, devotion to the building, and dedication to finishing the project. Individually, some had solid bank accounts, some had wonderful records as volunteers in the community, some had innovative ideas, and some, without cash, had new ideas about raising money. But this group of very different people had a common goal. They were all coming from a different direction, but they wanted to save the courthouse. As a newly formed group, they had to prove themselves to local financiers and demonstrate their fiscal responsibility. They succeeded in various ways and eventually were recognized by the banks as being worthy of formal assistance. Initially, without two nickels to rub together, they lifted an auction. They had no seed money. Al Thornmark obtained a goose to offer for bids, so they would have a little cash to organize a real auction. It was a handsome gray goose that Al carefully pinned up. The goose escaped. He made a second pen. The goose escaped again. But the sale went on because Al had solicited another goose that he knew could not read to one straight. It stayed in the third pen until it was sold for $55 to Ralph Davis on Old Woodford Road. The first goose was finally caught and returned to the donor. Fundraising continued. A variety of things. They sold land deeds to various parts of the original Wasco County. The nominal deed per unit, something like 25 cents an acre, but individuals that had a sentimental attachment would buy a whole community at 25 cents an acre. The first week, that project brought in $1,100. Malcolm Pryor arranged for the Portland Symphony to present several concerts, which were benefits for the restoration project. Bins of cherries were donated by 20 local orchards. Volunteers packaged it in 1 and 2 pound bags and sold it for 50 cents a pound. 1970 prices. That reduced the mortgage.
Like 2009.
So much needs to be done. Yeah.
Well, taking our treats is another form of gambling. The restored original courthouse was dedicated by Senator Mark Hatfield on July 4th, 1977, a festive occasion attended by descendants of the first judge, Joseph G. Wilson. Guests from the neighboring 17 counties that had been formed from the original largest county, legislators and state officials who had followed the ups and downs of the fate of the little building, and of course, local dignitaries, the Committee to Preserve the Courthouse, and many very interested townspeople who believed they were looking at the end of the wanderings of the original courthouse. January 18th, 1980, a memorable day, the note at the bank was paid off. The new location was appropriate and visitors from all over the world were happy with their visits. But restoration of a showplace was not what the committee had in mind. In 1972, timing was perfect to avail ourselves of a new government program that subsidized part of the salary of a qualified person who would help create programs of historic interest. We were lucky to get the help of a talented young man, Paul Kuiper, who had a sense of history and ability with interviews, cameras, and microphones. He started the Winter History Forum on Saturdays at 1:30 that were free to the public. He taped them and created a file of stories told by local seniors that recorded earlier days in Wasco County. By your presence here, you are participating in that series that Paul started way back, long time ago. At present, we're working on transfer of the tapes, organizing them, categorizing them, and making them more easily available to people who just want to listen to them, or if they're doing research on the area, they're an invaluable resource. It was a good 20 years. The Elks Auxiliary ran a Sunday afternoon bingo game, and they shared the profits with the courthouse. When the Elks Auxiliary withdrew their funding, the courthouse board decided to run their own bingo game. Walter Ericksen was the president at that time. He didn't really like bingo. But I was carried the day, and they set out to obtain supplies. Henderson Engineering donated the lower level of Old Hollow for the Saturday Town Cave. It was ideal. That lower level was not used for anything else. They could just set up the tables, the boards, the speakers, and they didn't have to take them down and set them up again. It was just there and ready. Strangely, the enthusiastic voices who knew how easy it was weren't available when the game started. Walter was a good manager, and he liked numbers. So when a very bingo-smart couple volunteered to coach him about running the game, he accepted. He had very mixed feelings about offering bingo to people who appeared to be living from one paycheck to the next. He gave it a lot of thought, then decided these folks who were really hooked into the game would continue to play. And if he didn't run a game, they'd play someplace else. He understood math well enough that he planned for generous payouts. The crowd increased, and the sale of bingo boards grew. The bigger the crowd, the more boards sold, the better the payouts. His effort to be fair became a win-win situation. Richie Heath was a faithful helper as treasurer of the Preservation Committee. Jim Weeks was always there until his doctor ordered him to stay away from the smoke. Until the game was canceled, Mary McDonald was a regular who cruised the room to check validity of cards when bingo was called. There were several others who helped with the sale of cards, the setup, but because I was not a participant, I don't remember their names. But it was a good crew, worked together well, and they seemed to enjoy what they did. Before long, Reggie was worrying about having too much money in the checking account. So they established a separate corporation, forming a foundation to guarantee the continued operation of the original courthouse. After 9 years, the sum was crowding the top limit that 501c3 nonprofit organizations were allowed to hold. So he stopped the game. Income from those investments pretty well covered operating costs. When the lease for the chamber expired, they wanted a rental increase that was impossible for the budget of the Courthouse Preservation Committee. So again, they looked for a new location. Foundation money was in a separate corporation and earmarked for the income to support the original courthouse operation. Originally, the investments were in bonds. It was I think it was called a ladder investment, that the bonds would be purchased so that they would pay off in sequence monthly to assure a steady income to cover the docent's salary, utilities, insurance, whatever. As the financial market shifted, these bonds were called in, so we had to move to other investments. We tried to anticipate financial needs and petitioned the board of the foundation for operational funds. Any requests for capital investment have to be presented with a clearly stated need so the foundation can justify that use of funds. What I'm trying to get across to you is the foundation is not a slush fund that is there and, oh boy, let's buy this. It is secured money, and income is all that is supposed to be used, except in case of dire necessity. It's more like an insurance policy. The lease gave the chamber permission to destroy the building if the committee ever abandoned it. Susan Huntington was quoted as denying any intent to destroy. But if the building was left there, they would use it. We entered an extended negotiation while we looked for a new location. And I've been trying to remember how we found this lot, and I think we were contemplating the Zimmerman property next door in that big grass plot on the road. And in investigating that, we learned about this lot. We checked on it. It was owned by the county. It was available. Well, if we got this, it would be the final move. For the lease with Wasco County is for renewable. It was for 50 years, and the cost was $1 a year. It had a provision that it is renewable, as I said, and there is no mention of a permission to destroy clause. Local rules and regulations have changed since the establishment of the chamber property. We had to meet city code, which included paved parking in the back, handicapped accessible walk from the street, and landscaping. This location is on natural terrain that had not been flooded even in 1894 when the city was inundated. So there would be no fill sand washing in under the foundation. It's in a section of historic homes on the city street that's only about 2 blocks long. The final move was more costly than the whole restoration. but we're sure it's final. I have not, well, to stay in 40 minutes, give or take, there are many pages on the cutting room floor. So I haven't listed the things that are on display, like the things in the jail that might be of interest to you, like the Oregon boat, which was really a torture equipment. We have ball and chains. The little boy looked at it, and the school children came for a while as they finished their 4th grade history, Oregon history. And I heard the squeal from the jail cell, and I said, "Oh, look at that! It's a ball and chain!" I thought those were only on TV. So there's a realism that kids can relate to. They have a lot of other good questions. One little girl heard this 130,000 square miles. And I could see, but she heard it, it just clicked, and she was kind of off there in dream world. Finally, she said, "How many acres is that?" Well, I told the story a little later to a group that had a farmer in it, and he's, "Oh, I'd say you just multiplied by 640. I hope the little girl found out. Another little girl asked where they kept the kids. Boy, front and center with my social studies lecture. The families were large. There were a lot of them, but everybody knew everybody else. And the Joneses knew what the Brown kids were able to do, permitted to do. And if the Jones saw the Brown kids on the line, the word got home immediately, and that was taken care of when Nettie came home probably. So they didn't need jail cells for children back in that period. With the new building functioning smoothly, and with the new board functioning smoothly, and the new board has attributes that Paul and I didn't have. Oh, who are you? They can speak in the current vernacular of the electronic age. They know what the other guy's talking about, and we don't. With that skill and the equipment that we have been able to get, there's no limits to what they can do with the material that they have now that needs to be processed for better storage and better accessibility. We are indebted to the Oregon Cultural Trust for a grant that helped us to get some of this equipment. And Dwayne knows how to use it. He's a good chopper. He knows how to find it. So, I think we're off on a ride. We're off on a good ride. And I invite you to come along. Many of our programs are free. A donation yard is on the desk if you choose. And this tough little building welcomes new friends and new members. Whatever your choice, watch for the activity and new history items as they become available from our files. Thank you for sharing your day with us. Just remember, the first 150 years are the hardest. And now if there is time, you can have discussion and questions or whatever.
Would you like to thank the people who created this video?
I told you I was going to do that first, and then I got sidetracked. I am illiterate about this type of thing, but my daughter is pretty well versed, and I have a script that I and they had other engagements today and were unable to come, but I have been very pleased with the work that these kids, and they're interested too. Of course, it didn't hurt that Irene was a history major.
What was the year that the building was moved to this site?
Never again. It was,
6, 7.
it was after the flood.
That same year.
It was the end of the 20-year lease, and it took us about 3 years to.
It was there for the 96 flood.
Yeah, okay, and then, those, good jail contingency.
I came down and worked on this in '97, it was after we were married. I put the stairway on.
It has,
Motor and 8 childs
okay,
motor,
Yeah.
8 childs,
yeah,
and Alan Smythe and I put the stairway on. In '97.
Stuart Chadwick. In '97.
And I signed the lease, leased this to the.
When was that?
So I wasn't on until 96, 97.
There were actually 2 lease agreements signed. One, the original lease was the whole lot. And then when they decided that the little building in the back had some archaeological significance, we got a new lease excluding that little corner of the lot, but starting the count over again.
For the 50-year.
I remember that.
So we gained a couple years there.
And that little building is another unique feature. It's one building, and it's on the property line. And this house has, half of it, and this half. We didn't want our half, and we were going to tear it down. Somebody thought better of it, decided to take it over.
Out of curiosity, how many of you were involved in this process at one point or another? Raise your hands. Well, our thanks
You're saying you were
and
volunteer?
eternal gratefulness to all of you.
We were boat drivers.
I think somebody else had something to say. No?
Well, look around downstairs, the jail cell has a lot of pretty small things to do. Available today about the Oregon boot.
I knew, have known for a long time that Marilyn was fascinated with that boot down there. We couldn't get the case unlocked so that she could put it on, but we're still trying. To use the current parlance, I Googled Oregon boot and came up with a quotation from the Oregon Department of Corrections, which I copied for you today. And if you turn yours over and it has a sticker on the back of it, would you raise your hand?
There's a bunch of blank ones back here, check them all.
There should be. Okay, Diane, okay, and you have one? Very good, there should be a third one. Oh,
Got a lot of choices back there.
here, look at the ones next to you.
Some on the floor.
We have some more prizes for you.
There's one. You found it.
Okay, Betsy, got one? Okay. We have some door prizes. We have the Columbia River Gorge book that came out a few years ago. We have, are you ready for this? A 1989 calendar But it's the historical calendar, and it has a dozen pictures of historic fidels. And one thing that Marilyn didn't mention, and I think it maybe was in the second round of fundraising, these medallions were done for the bicentennial. And I read in old minutes that they ordered 300 of them, and they sold them, and then they ordered 300 more. And so we still have quite a stash of these, if you know anyone who needs a bunch of them. Anyway, well, Diane, which of these would you like?
Well, I think the Oregon book.
The calendar? Is that what you said?
What she said.
The other one.
This one.
Yeah.
She wants this. Okay. Okay. Mrs. Smith? Anyone? Okay.
Thank you. Very much.
Nancy? There you go. To add to your collection. When we did the historic Dallas Days melodrama up here, we did some door prizes, and we gave out genuine artificial gold coins. So you have a genuine artificial gold coin. Oh, it's go ahead. You can come up and sit back down if you want. I'm going to turn this back out over to Carl to close this down, and then they're coffee and cookies downstairs.
Well, just a reminder, next week, 11 o'clock in the morning instead of 1:30, but then the week after that, we'll be back at the 1:30 time. So, thank you for coming. Thank you very much, Marilyn.
And
Good program.
we not only have a donation jar downstairs, but we have membership applications. We would love you to be a member of our group. Thanks.
Thank you.